Okay. We've got some more fun stuff today. I think this is going to be somewhat of a continuation of what we did on Sunday. And then we still need to come up with something for tomorrow. But this is the only thing that I could come up with for today. This is what I just read, or at least recently read, in the Embodied Cognition Handbook, the Routledge Handbook of Embodied Cognition. This version was recent, I think, 2024, second edition. So all the way in this social and moral cognition and emotion, we've got this morality in the body. Which is not as seductive of a title as morality is emotional, but we will have to go from there. I think that's totally fine. This is all going to be part 3 stuff. We have to talk about this stuff in part 3. And we have to do that to point out how grounded our morality is in our broader understanding and how it manifests emotionally. So it's not just our understanding, but also the stuff that we talk about in part 2, such as our emotional regulation, all these other aspects of our predisposition, what predisposes us to feel a certain way in the moment. And in this case, predisposes us to feel like something is moral or not moral in the moment, even when it seems like we are doing so leveraging rationality. So I do need to end the stream at like 8, so I don't know if we're gonna have time for this, but maybe we'll get a deep research on morality. Okay, what if I just asked a question? Does morality, actually, how much does morality depend on our bodily / emotional? What if I just said body / emotions? You know what, let's keep it that. How rational is it? So if I were to go with that, what do we get as our... All right, I'm going to just start because we do need to start moving. But we will get back to that shortly. All right, morality in the body. Brendan Strejic. I don't know. Strechik. And Chenbo Zhang. And is that like a Zhang? Chenbo Zhang. I don't know. There is a long tradition of thought that conceives of immorality as in opposition to the appetites and desires of the body. Such physical experiences have, at best, been seen as distractions from the expression of values guided by reason, and at worst, as the direct cause of sin and immorality through temptation. However, this understanding is being called into question by recent theoretical and empirical work that supports the position that the body is not only an obstacle to morality and moral action, but also a contributor to moral reasoning. Moral reasoning. Moral concepts seem to be built using mental machinery that is also used for processing bodily experiences. Empirical work in social psychology has shown how intimately these two domains are intertwined, with both reason and bodily inputs feeding back into moral judgment and moral action. This perspective is consistent with the emerging convergence in evolutionary biology, which claims that morality evolved through the body during the process of negotiating the various pressures of selection. So this is how we ground everything in our document, pretty much. It's all this discussion of evolution. You kind of have to buy into the physical world first before you can do this, but we do believe in the physical world. All right, understanding this reciprocal relationship between morality and body may allow one to know when bodily input may result in maladaptation with regard to our current social environment. For example, the common derogation of the outsider, once perhaps adaptive to defend against invaders and the unknown, can now have many negative side effects, especially in a mass diverse culture. This can include prejudice, fear, or discrimination when no real danger exists. Yo, so I'm reading this Heidegger guy. Are you actually reading this Heidegger guy? Because that would be pretty exciting. Or at least I would find it exciting. All right, so do I need to read all these? Yeah, let's read through this because this is all good stuff. This text is pissing me off. Hey, if you have any questions, feel free to come here with it. You know, there's just like some really weird language in there that means nothing until like 5 things connect. Okay. Philosophy, reason, and emotion. Historically, there have been 2 influential dualisms in philosophy. The ontological body-spirit duality, sometimes framed as body/mind, and the emotion-reason duality. These dualities have had numerous forebears from the Platonic, which actually divided the soul into 3 parts, appetitive, rational, and spirited, to the Christian, from the Platonic to the Christian. Those several early influential philosophers, such as Democritus and Epicurus, did not separate the functioning of the mind from the functioning of the body throughout the story of Western philosophy. I'm sorry, I'm reading that incorrectly. Those several earlier influential philosophers did not separate the functioning of the mind from the functioning of the body. Throughout the story of Western philosophy, dualism has mostly been ascendant. Descartes reaffirmed this tradition in the 17th century at the beginning of the scientific revolution by aligning dualist rationality with scientific process in the Discourse on Method. The dualism of Descartes was driven by a desire to find a firm basis for a developing scientific epistemology, which was ultimately provided by the dictum, "I think, therefore I am." Though many modern proponents of morality based on rationality do not subscribe to Cartesian substance dualism, the concept has framed the debate. Okay, maybe Carnap was right. Maybe he's speaking nonsense. I don't even understand what exactly he's prescribing. Well, that's the thing. He doesn't prescribe anything in there. I don't think he prescribes a single thing in that entire book. I think it's all a discussion of abstractly conceptualizing the fundamental characteristics of consciousness. You see, I'm a practical guy, Stan. Yeah, so it does. The book doesn't tell you to do anything. It's really giving you a sense of how deeply ingrained like the other aspects of our experience are in. Actually, that's a terrible way to say it. But he's pointing out all the embodied aspects of our conscious experience, how holistic this is, and while we tend to spend our time in a mode of conceptualizing what's going on, we're never going to be able to actually capture that. But there's a lot going on there. There's stuff that connects it with embodied cognition. There's stuff that connects it with predictive processing. Stuff that connects it with a view of social dynamics and whatnot. So yeah, I mean when he's we if there's any specific topic you want to talk about, I'm down to dive into it, or at least give my take on it. But he's definitely not speaking nonsense. Once again, though, not once again, but the main thing though to point out is that what he's doing is speculative. Like they didn't have science, they didn't have the science to he didn't have the science to back up what he's saying. He's really just Staneuver the maneuver. That's very nice. That's a top tier one so far. I mean, granted, a lot of them are pretty great, but I like it. How's it going, Daniel End? yeah, at the end of the day, he's just speculating based on his own understanding of his own experience, and he's making sense of his experience through the lens of what he's learned from what came before him. So the other philosophies, like he was, influenced by Hegel and whatnot, and he's just trying to give like a more foundational approach, which, yeah, that's all that's going on there. Unfortunately, I don't even know if it's like worth the read. It's a cool book if you stick with it, but yeah, it's not that prescriptive. It doesn't really tell. It's not like a type of philosophy where you can take up a philosophy because of it, as much as people try to say like, oh, you can be more authentic, like that. I think that misses the mark of what he's trying to say. At some point, I'll make a video on Heidegger, but we don't. I don't think that's that important. In all of these dualist conceptions, morality has been identified with reason, often in tension with the appetite of emotional body. As such, morality has been investigated through the lens of reason. Bodily influence is even used as a mitigating factor in legal cases, as emotional influence is often seen as a loss of control or decrease in free will. For example, consider the heat of passion defenses. Emotional and bodily influence has thus been seen as a biasing factor in the proper expression of moral behavior. It is undeniable that sometimes emotions can motivate ethically problematic behavior, but modern cognitive science has been uncovering empirical evidence that the functioning of moral reasoning is expressed through the body using emotional cues. These cues manifest linguistically as metaphors, which have become the philosophical spur of modern embodiment research. So we're going to go into that. The problem is when I come from reading Aristotle, who is for the most very simple and straightforward and a Greek of action, and go to reading Heidegger, I'm like that. Yeah, even Kant is a man of action. Yeah, there's no action happening in being in time. It's all identifying. It's all organizing, like concepts. Really, it's just pointing out, hey, this thing is happening, and you can, if you kind of figure out what he's trying to say, you can then find it intuitive. Like you can intuit what it's trying to say there, what it's trying to point out. It's like, imagine you're doing mindfulness meditation and you're paying attention to your mind when you're just existing, when you're experiencing the world. Heidegger's pointing to things and he's saying, well, that's happening, and notice that that's happening, and notice that that's happening. Like that's really all he does in that book. He doesn't tell you to do anything about it. He's just telling you to notice it. So what's the point then? Change my... Yeah, like literally, what is the point? The point, I would say, is it gives you a better sense of like how embodied our experience is, how deep... I found you in a different chat. Yo, Reclusi, what's good? That's all good. I think that's fine. If people use it toxically, I'll start cutting them, but I don't think it's inherently toxic. But yeah. Yeah, the point, I think, is just to point those things out so that you can have a sense of a better sense of your own phenomenology, like what you're seeing in your experience. Like the closest that I could give you in terms of like helping you out here is what he points out in his phenomenology is very akin to our discussion of meaning in the beginning here, where we point out how meaning is always just like already there when we're experiencing the world, how we seem to have these concerns that are directing our attention. We seem to be engaged in things that, his whole idea of tools, when I pick up a pen and I start using it, like the pen, it disappears from my conscious view. Like I'm not even paying attention to the pen when I start writing. What I'm paying attention to is what I'm writing. So he really ties in phenomenology with this notion of affordances, which is something more on like the embodied cognition front. So these, I mean, his philosophy probably influenced a lot of embodied cognition. So that that could be also the point. Like it did actually affect scientists, and it affected the trajectory of science to this day, where people are now pointing out morality in the body. So it is a lot of cool stuff like that. I mean it. I meant it lovingly. I love Onion. Very nice. Don't we all? Welcome to the Twitch philosophy community. Oh, is it? Are you new to the philosophy community, or were you in a different type of genre chat? I didn't know you were a philosophy nerd as well. Hell yeah. Hey, Reclusi. I've read he didn't even finish Being in Time. Right. I wonder what he was going to write. Yeah, so he was going to write like more than half, or let me say this another way. I think what he wrote was less than half of what he wanted to write. Like he had so much there where he was actually going to start like popping off and like specifically pointing out. He was going to specifically point out where like some other philosophers went wrong. I don't know if that was going to be like Descartes or whatnot. And then he was really concerned with like what is the meaning of being itself, and I don't think he ever figured that one out. I think by the end of his life, he was more interested in, I don't know, more of the Hegelian stuff. I'm not sure. I forget what kept him, but I don't think he like figured out what he was trying to figure out within Being in Time. That said, what he did, put on paper was pretty, I guess, good enough for a lot of people to be bought in. All right, so metaphor. So they're pointing out how morality takes on this linguistic manifestation of metaphors. All right, many moral concepts are described and conceptualized through metaphors, which are often grounded in bodily experiences. Some of the key foundational physical metaphors that anchor moral reasoning include uprightness, height, balance, control, freedom of movement, health, strength, and purity. The up metaphor is particularly potent, associated with more control, good, and rational. The emotion associated with being uplifted by the altruistic. Yo, Reclusi, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad I made a good enough first impression. It was probably the Santa hat. The emotion associated with being uplifted by the altruistic deeds of others is often referred to as elevation. It is almost impossible to even discuss this emotion without the assistance of metaphors. Ideas of value also have physical forebears, such as the concrete experience of ownership and quantity. Well-being is considered a form of wealth, and languages are rich with examples of accounting metaphors, such as cost, loss, and gain. Regarding happiness and the good life. And these metaphors extend to fairness, reciprocation, debt, revenge, and similar concepts. Finally, purity, corruption, contagion, health, and strength are all key terms in moral discourse and are almost synonymous with concepts of good and evil. Consider the meaning of the sentences, he is corrupt or she is pure. This collection of metaphors has provided a framework for social scientists to investigate the impact of bodily and physical experience on moral judgment. Okay, it is thought that the evolutionary experience of survival has equipped the mind with a number of concrete concepts used for day-to-day survival. More nutrition is desirable, dirty things are sources of contagion, and so forth. These concepts were then available for repurposing in a pre-adaptive fashion. This perspective is often discussed as a form of scaffolding, as the concrete experience being scaffolded into our conceptual development, which informs much of the rest of the analysis below. So, pointing out that, like the notion of morality within our within our bodies and minds probably came about prior to the more sophisticated language that we kind of arrive at. And so that's how these things could like be connected with one another. Is this an argument for emotivism? Let me see what emotivism covers. Meta-ethical theory about what moral statements mean. Emotivism says that moral judgments don't describe facts and aren't true or false. Instead, they express emotions or attitudes and try to influence others. So I would say that emotivism might be taking this a step farther, where it's insinuating like a little bit of a what people ought to do. So like the idea that moral judgments are about trying to influence others is a little bit higher abstraction than what this is discussing. This is just discussing that our ability to rationalize a moral situation requires an underlying emotional process. Yo, embrace primalism. What's good? So this doesn't make a case about like what we're doing as social creatures, even though, yeah, you could take it to be that what we're trying to do unintentionally is to communicate our own moral understanding and, pragmatically, what ends up capturing a society is what people are compelled by, what allows them to survive over time, etc. So yeah, like that discussion of how outsiders might have led to an emotional feeling of like disgust or avoidance, like that would have been deeply ingrained via evolution. Just breathing, hell yeah. Keep enjoying the breathing. Breathing's great. Murder is wrong. This means something like boo to murder. I disapprove of murder. Don't do it. Yeah, I mean, you can take that approach, but the don't do it thing is like the little added extra. But yeah, like we are, like this would be a more close to home idea. So it would be suggesting this idea that moral facts aren't true or false. Like that's the issue here. In the moment they can feel true or false, and this isn't to insinuate what we ought to do with that, whether we ought to try to convey our moral opinion, but this is highly suggesting that our moral framework, our moral understanding in the moment, is contingent upon our culture, upon our past, upon our body, most directly. So, though the structure of metaphors may be stable across cultures, specific expression can vary dramatically across time and space. Thus, the unclean may be universally associated with the malevolent, but exactly what is considered to be unclean will likely vary by culture. So, yeah, these ideas are all covered here. That is, the concrete objects that satisfy specific metaphors are malleable, but this mental subsystem of, for example, disgust or dirtiness, and the avoidance seems to be available to people in general, in the sense that it is universal for humans. It is part of the human DNA. These associations are empirically observed in our use of language, but they do not in themselves lead to the conclusion that morality is shaped by bodily experience, as opposed to just being used descriptively. To make this link, both experimental psychology and neuroscience have found that experiences of these physical metaphors can affect moral judgment and moral action in measurable, significant ways. So then we get to look through a bunch of these. So, instead of seeing moral judgment as the process of rational analysis, numerous studies in experimental and social psychology have found that moral judgment tends to happen quickly and intuitively and is often influenced by bodily experiences. Haidt and Hirsch, for example, constructed hypothetical situations designed to be socially repugnant, but not harmful in any way, to question the idea that moral judgment was carefully and rationally constructed. They found that people's affective reactions, So their emotional reactions to those vignettes were much stronger predictors of moral judgment than analysis of harm and moral principle. So they found that the visceral emotion that they felt was more impactful than their rational moral framework when push came to shove. Participants in their studies typically express strong moral opposition to disgusting but harmless acts, such as a consensual kiss between siblings. When pressed to explain their moral reasoning, however, a common reaction was moral dumbfounding, strong moral condemnation with an utter inability to rationally explain their position. The social intuitionism model proposed by Jonathan Haidt to explain this phenomenon holds that moral reasoning is retroactive, with rational processing often happening after the fact to justify and explain decisions previously determined by non-rational means. Thus, the model questions the causal power of reasoning in moral judgment. This is congruent with the perspective of embodied morality, which sees morality arising through bodily experience, often expressed as emotions. These means are primarily emotional and involve revulsion and disgust. The emotions seem to be expressed through the medium of the body and understood using the language of metaphors. Okay. Social neuroscience. Historically, when confronted with different explanations for moral action, the tools for investigation were limited. Epicurus conceived of the functioning of the mind as physical movements in the chest, but this was almost more of a metaphysical position derived from the earlier pre-Socratic atomisms. Now, with fMRI machines and the beginning of brain maps, we begin to have a better picture of what goes on in the human body when thinking happens and decisions are made. Here we go. We got Damasio coming up here. A number of prominent studies found that the brain regions that govern emotional regulation are intimately connected to moral reasoning and contemplation. Different parts of the brain are active when thinking about moral dilemmas that have rationally identical outcomes, but different emotional engagement. For example, one intriguing thought experiment involves two structurally equivalent dilemmas in which a runaway trolley, so we got the trolley problem, is headed towards 5 people and will kill them if not stopped. This dilemma is framed in two ways: a stand in distance switch version and the up and close push version. So the version where you'd hit the switch to make it go, and then the version where you push the person down and to get in front of the trolley. The stranger will die, but his body will stop the trolley from reaching the others. In both cases, people decide whether it is right to kill one person to save 5 others. Yet most people say that they would pull the switch but not push the person. The former response represents utilitarian reasoning. People seem to suggest that sacrificing one person to save 5 is the right course of action because it produces greater good. The latter response represents Kantian reasoning that emphasizes the intrinsic value of a human life and the recognition that the rightness of an action is independent of its consequences. Hence, the outcome of saving 5 others cannot justify the killing of one. It is not hard to see that these two perspectives have irreconcilable principles. While utilitarian thinking puts the good before the right, the Kantian perspective emphasizes that what is right precedes what is good. So how could rational thinking lead simultaneously to contradictory principles? A recent fMRI study found that this inconsistent moral aversion against pushing down a person to save others may stem from increased emotional engagement. The horrific thought of pushing someone to his or her death is much more emotionally arousing than pulling a switch. This again shows that emotional involvement is an important contributor to moral reasoning. So I'm not too blown away by that example. I think there's like a lot of reasons why you might be more skeptical about the pushing the person, given the ramifications of it, socially and legally, the fact that you could try and maybe not work, it might not work, like you might not actually push them over, and now you have this whole terrible situation where a bunch of people die and you haven't pushed the person and you're going to jail. And then also like a switch is like, we just assume switches work, so that's like a real easy idea. So this isn't, that wasn't as compelling as the stuff that's coming up here for me. I don't buy this, to be honest. Yep. So I'm with you so far, but we do have some nicer stuff coming. But some would go even further to suggest that emotional engagement may be necessary to moral choices. This is based on research showing that brain activities during contemplation of utilitarian dilemmas resembles non-moral dilemmas, as well as the observation that individuals with antisocial traits tend to make more utilitarian choices in moral dilemmas. Thus, Bloom questioned that the moral nature of utilitarian reasoning altogether, and that it is based on pure calculations that are largely devoid of context and meaning. This stronger view coincides with research based on patients with brain damage to their ventromedial prefrontal cortex, an important brain region that is involved in emotional regulation. These patients retain full capability of rational thought and reasoning, which are the type of processes required for utilitarian reasoning, but seem to have lost emotional connection and, more importantly, the ability to adapt to social and moral conventions. Over time, these patients tend to grow more antisocial. So this is Damasio figuring out his whole somatic marker idea, that when you lose a certain part of your brain that deals with emotions, but you keep the rational side, then you start going off the course, and you start losing your ability to be able to process situations in a way that other people might find moral. So it's showing that, you know, there's a at least some component here is emotional. So this is essentially very anti-Greek. Well, maybe not. My claim was too intense. Unfortunately, as a philosophy guy, I unfortunately don't have a good understanding of the taxonomy of philosophy, of historical philosophy. So I don't know how to deal with that one. I mean, I'm not even sure they're aware of the Greeks' philosophies. All right, one underlying theory is that that emotional experiences guide moral judgments and decision making through a series of bodily signals called somatic markers. Lacking proper somatic markers, as in the case of the prefrontal cortex damaged patients, an otherwise functional brain is unable to attach moral weight or value to outcomes effectively. That's Damasio. This proposition that emotional impairment leads to moral malfunction corroborates the position that moral reasoning can't only be the product of rationality. Thus, research on linguistics, emotion, and neuroscience converge on the involvement of bodily experiences in moral development and reasoning. Not only do people appropriate physical concepts such as up versus down and clean versus dirty and recast them in social and moral terms, but they also recycle emotions and associated brain circuitries developed for rudimentary physical tasks in early development and survival, for example, disgust to avoid poisonous food, to help make sense of more abstract moral situations, for example, disgust of betrayal and cheating. In the next section, we will discuss specific bodily experiences that may inform moral judgment and decision-making to demonstrate how the physical and moral domains continue to overlap cognitively, emotionally, and neurologically. So that's where we're heading next. We need our alpha betas. This is written by, I think, a couple of scientists. Aristotle is a rational soul kind of guy, so for him, rationality is essential to morality. So this wouldn't fully fit in his picture. Right. So this chapter actually opened up with saying that there is a long tradition of thought that conceives of morality as an opposition to the appetites and desires of the body. Where do we go? Yeah, talking about the dualities. These dualities have had numerous forebears, from the Platonic to the Christian, though several early influential philosophers such as Democritus and Epicurus did not separate the functioning of the mind from the functioning of the body. Throughout the story of Western philosophy, dualism has mostly been ascendant. Descartes reaffirmed this tradition with the whole uh, his whole dualism, and yeah. So this, yeah, these, they are aware of like that type of thinking, and oh, man, and I think this would be in opposition of that type of thought, um, or not in opposition, but it's less of opposition, because when we're making these types of arguments, it's kind of paradoxical to try to make a rational argument against science like this if the science is compelling. So the science just needs to be compelling. You can make a rational argument against the takeaways of findings. All right, we need to find bodily experiences that influence morality. So this is where stuff starts getting really real. I mean, the somatic marker hypothesis we've discussed on this channel before, so I was pretty bought in by that, but let's see what happens here. Right, okay, that's what you meant by anti-Greek. Yeah, then I think this would be anti-Greek, but not intentionally so. I don't think they're trying to beef. I think they're just pointing out where the science is taking us. Without the linchpin, it's so confusing. I'm not sure. I don't even remember what linchpin means. Linchpin, what do we got? A person or thing vital to an enterprise, a pin passed through the end. All right, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that's implying then. All right. Several specific physical experiences that are related to the primary linguistic metaphors discussed above seem to contribute to, in various ways, to moral judgment and moral decision-making. The physical experiences most potent in influencing morality are those regarding disgust and purity, but many other embodied concepts such as position, color, and interior states have weight as well. The emotion of disgust was originally, I don't know how to say this word, gustatory?
Gustatory.
Whoa, that's so loud. Gustatory. The easiest way we can say it. The emotion of disgust was originally a gustatory... Actually, I should look up what that means. Concern with tasting or the sense of taste. Okay, I would have never known that. Was originally a gustatory emotion rooted in our evolutionary past as a motivational mechanism that avoids the consumption of contaminating substances. At the basic physical level, disgust serves as a guide for approach and avoidance, and it is obvious how to reason evolutionarily about how this function might have arisen, as it results in avoidance of external dangers such as contamination from rotten organic matter and enhancement of survival fitness. Disgust operates on many sensory levels, from visual to taste, which functions as a fast line of defense against ingesting potential harmful food. This low-level physical aid to behavior, rooted deeply in bodily experience, has been co-opted for use by high-level social functions as a guide for avoiding potential social dangers such as transgressions by others. Many studies have been done recently in social psychology that link moral transgression and physical contamination. Physical and moral disgust seem to use brain regions that overlap within the frontal and temporal lobes. Additionally, similar facial expressions have been found in response to both moral and physical disgust. These studies form a good foundation for the evolutionary concept of pre-adaptation and the reuse of cognitive capabilities shaped first for interacting with the physical environment, but later conscripted for use by moral cognition. This has particularly interesting implications for moral judgment being affected by indirect physical stimuli, such as when an emotion is not specifically elicited by a particular target of judgment. This has been shown in studies using hypnotism, ambient smell, and gustatory experiences such as bad taste. All of these manipulations were found to impart negative qualities from the realm of the physical to the realm of the moral. These effects probably have differing magnitudes based on individual disgust sensitivity, as Jones and Fitness found that those who are more easily disgusted by physical contaminants are also more likely to engage in harsher moral judgment. Crazy stuff. So this is pointing out that they found that stimuli that would affect your disgust of like gustatory disgust, like, you know, imagine you just smelled something bad, will now affect your moral reasoning in, or like right after that happens, which is kind of insane, and also kind of like kind of clear. Like it seems like to be an effective argument here. Oh, here we go. What do we got going on here? Stan highlighting the whole page frantically. Yeah, so with some of these, I was highlighting the whole page. I don't know. I think there is an underlying phenomenology tied to moral decision making that renders empirical investigation difficult. That's probably true. Not impossible, obviously. I'm a physicalist. But not sure. Maybe the chapter answers some of my questions. Right? Like, I don't know if this like chapter is conclusive in terms of the scope of this connection, but it's just pointing out that there are connections. Like there are, you know, it's not moral reasoning isn't completely just rational thought. Now, what we are going to do on this channel very soon as April, I think, because in April the theme is discussing thinking itself. We are going to look into how emotional our rational thinking is, regardless of morality. Like that's really the discussion we should have had before this, because morality is downstream from thinking. But it really seems like there's a lot of evidence that shows that bodily processes affect our moral thinking, and it makes sense given our discussions of consciousness. Reclusi, some backstory is like a month ago, I went on this absolute tangent. I kind of got stun locked by something Alex O'Connor said, and we spent a month on the topic of consciousness, and that led to seeing how deeply ingrained our consciousness is with our body and bodily states. Okay, it's all important. Perpetrator discussed the moral limits of gut feelings. This book offers a very deep investigation into morality and disgust. Okay, are you recommending this? Because I will throw this into our part 3 notes here. Yes, it's brilliant. Okay. Read. Morality and emotions as a topic. Okay. Unfortunately, we're going to get to that like in 16 months, but we'll get to that eventually. We've got a lot of stuff to cover. All right, where did I end up here? Okay, sensory perception, cleanliness. Cleanliness and purity have been an important part of religious ceremony for most major world religions throughout history. Given the importance of religion in our moral code, scholars such as Haidt argue that purity and sanctity constitute a fundamental moral foundation. It is not until recently, however, that empirical research in social psychology has started to demonstrate that the bodily perception of cleanliness can be both a consequence of moral status and a determinant of moral judgment and behavior. This connection between physical purity and morality has been corroborated by several experimental findings. One set of results verifies this connection by observing that morally threatening situations prompt physical cleansing, much like actual physical dirtiness. For example, the following transgressions have all been found to induce a greater desire for cleansing products, reminding people of their own so these are the transgressions. Reminding people of their own past immoral acts, leaving false voicemail messages or lying through email, or playing violent video games. So I don't know what it means. The following transgressions have all been found to induce a great. So I guess maybe you just prompt the subjects with like this type of idea, and that affects whether or not they're going to be purchasing cleanliness products, cleansing products. Though these effects are similar and presumably activate the same underlying cognitive machinery, the effects also have unique manifestations appropriate to a particular modality. Thus, mouthwash was most desired in the voicemail experiment, whereas hand sanitizer was more strongly desired in the case of deception through email. That's insane. Wow. So I guess the idea there where like if you do something immoral that involves your voice, you would be more likely to get mouthwash, whereas hand sanitizer would be closer to something that you would an immoral act that you would use your hands for. That's crazy. Um, oh, is there a singular study that book covers? Also offers a bit of different perspective to what this chapter is suggesting. Okay, nice. No rush. It happens when it happens. 16 months is the optimistic timeline. We've been good and bad about timelines on this channel, given the scope of what we're trying to do. GTA made me a terrible person. I don't think there's a lot of evidence of like video games affecting, you know, behavior like that, moral behavior like that. I think this is specifically like if you were to see someone, you know, killing a bunch of people on GTA, that would affect the, you know, whether or not you want to buy the cleaning product. I think this is accurate in terms of more primitive disgust responses, but when you look at morality at the extremes, like committing genocide, the disgust actually seems to have an opposite impact on morality. The disgust leads to further violence. But anyways, that's the last on that book. Right. Okay. So I think these are congruent. I don't know if these are contradictory. I think this would even further point out that you can take a... Like, just because we're talking about morality doesn't mean that we're talking about something that we would believe is morally good. So even though you can co-opt this... So that, yeah, like this is the real downstream implication of pointing out some of these things, is that our understanding of what is morally right and wrong would be affected by our social environment. It would be affected by our culture. So if you are in a group that feels like a certain thing is immoral, then that will co-opt your disgust, senses, such that you find that disgusting. But it's not that like there was something inherent about that thing that had to be disgusting. That's kind of what this chapter mentioned earlier on. Like in different cultures, different things are morally bad and then disgusting, or found disgusting. But the disgust, which is the human part, is what would be universal. So right now it seems like the disgust. I don't think that's the case this is trying to make. I think it's specifically just pointing out at a more deeper level that disgust is being involved in moral reasoning. I don't think it's making a case about whether or not disgust is like... I mean, now granted, they might not have the balls to say, what I'm trying to imply here, because it's a very controversial to make a case that our moral understanding of what is right and wrong is affected by our culture. Like that might be, and perhaps it would be inappropriate for them to do so in this context, given that they don't have evidence that leads to that type of conclusion. I'm pulling from a lot of other things that we've talked about on this channel that would would contribute to that. I'm a moral realist, so I disagree with you here, but I don't want to sidetrack things. No worries. We are open for everyone. Do they list sample numbers? Ooh, I'm not sure what you're referring to. My bad, joined a bit late. No worries. Yeah, I guess just a general gist is I kind of try to push this type of idea of our understanding of what is... Like, we usually don't discuss morality here because we just haven't gotten that far. The backstory is that part one, which is all about understanding the world and our freedom within it, is what we've been working on for like a year and a half and finished up over the summer. Now we're starting to work on part two, which is identifying and pursuing our goals. And then part three is like where we actually get to living a fulfilling life. And this really shouldn't say moral. It's really that we have to have a discussion of how feeling that your life is moral affects how fulfilling it feels. So part three is really about, let's just say the one goal is trying to live a fulfilling and emotionally rewarding life. And that's what we're ultimately looking for. That's the goal of this channel right now. So, but yeah, usually I'm harping on this idea that what is like absolutely true is like or no, I should say like the idea that there is like an external truth that is absolute and transcendent and whatnot is incongruent with the science that we know and what it suggests, and also a lot of the contemporary philosophy that we know. And I try to make that case in, I mean, that's not like the thesis of part one, but you know, that's the type of case we make. That's the case I make all the time, but like how many people they check doing the transgression of playing violent video games. I don't think they're making a case about violent video games being morally wrong. I think that they're specifically pointing out that when people are prompted with doing something immoral in a video game, that still affects their you know, it primes them in some way. And in this case, it just primed them to purchase cleaning products. So, you know, maybe they saw someone playing a video game and they saw a dirty gamer and they're like, oh man, this guy's got to clean his hands. We usually don't discuss morality here. Instead, we own Alex O'Connor with facts and logic and reference Heidegger and Brandom every once in a while, very frequently. That's beautiful. Have I read the Black Notebooks? I don't know what the Black Notebooks are. What are the Black Notebooks? Oh, has anyone tried 5.2? How is 5.2 compared to 5.1? Oh, geez, we got more Heidegger here. I feel like I feel like Being in Time was all I probably needed from Heidegger. I don't want to spend too much time with Heidegger. He's a pretty controversial figure, and rightly so. He kept over several decades. I mean, I guess it would be pretty cool to see where he went after Being in Time, if this is post Being in Time, which I imagine it is. Simply because of the black covers. They're intended as a private philosophical reflections, not polished works for publication. But yeah, I strongly believe that, like, contemporary science, especially regarding like embodied cognition, gives us more today than these notebooks would. I mean, Heidegger was popping off in Being in Time for doing that prior to what we know today, both from, you know, neuroscience and psychology. But that I wouldn't privilege what he's saying over what we can conclude based on the science we've got today. So do not read those books. Okay, is this where he starts getting political or something? Because I'll stay away from that. All right, 7-Eleven. Okay, we got to keep cruising. Mr. Marth. Oh, Mr. Martin. I see. I haven't noticed a big difference personally, but I really disliked 5.1 and used 3.0 instead, so I should give it a go for a bit. 5.1 really pissed me off. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I'm pretty much always on Gemini now. It just seems to be, you know, they seem to be ahead. I guess I'm putting my bets on them right now. And also, they've been pretty good about, you know, I mean, they glaze. Gemini glazes a lot. And perhaps I just need to put more guardrails there, but it seems to be pretty effective. I looked up the sample size, 70 students. Oh, that's what you were asking, the sample size. Oh, do they list the sample sizes of these studies? Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess I didn't follow through and look into it, but. All right, the most important aspect of these findings is how the physical and moral domains overlap and spill over into each other. Because of this relationship, the way that cleanliness signals the absence of contaminants and the way disgust alerts the body to the presence of contaminants can have moral ramifications as well. This sometimes irrational metaphorical link is nonetheless often quite potent in practice. One hypothesis based on this connection between the two domains is that not only does the immoral feel impure, but also the pure should feel moral. If that were true, then an increased sense of personal cleanliness might trigger feelings of moral superiority or moral righteousness. Cleanliness has been found in the lab to trigger feelings of moral purity, and even proximity to symbols of cleanliness seems to affect moral standing. So we've got more studies to like verify here. So far, I trust this broader book, though. I don't think that it would allow authors to just start throwing stuff in that wasn't vetted. Okay, for example, Helzer and Pizarro measured harsher moral judgments arising from standing next to a hand sanitizer, and these guys found that feeling physically clean moralized various contested issues, such as littering and homosexuality, more harshly. All right. Yeah, so it seems like the there's a two-way street here that seeing something immoral or being immersed in something immoral makes you feel less clean, and seeing things that are less clean make you affects your judgment towards things. Harsher moral judgments. In addition to the influence of cleanliness on moral judgment, physical cleansing may also directly impact moral behavior because it alters people's moral self-image. Thus, individuals who have transgressed are less likely to engage in compensatory and restitution behaviors if they have a chance to physically clean themselves, which serves as a symbolic means to restore moral balance. This was indeed what the study found. In their study, participants who recalled past unethical behaviors, who had a chance to wipe their hands using an antiseptic wipe, were less likely to volunteer to help others compared to those who did not wash their hands. So in this case, it's not like your hands are unclean and that's going to make you do something immoral. It's that if you feel like literally you can clean your hands in an easier way, then you take the easier way than the actual like moral way. Like you do the physical thing that's easy versus the moral thing that's a little bit more difficult. That's not to say that this is like a axiom that's coming out of this. It's just pointing out this connection between our understanding of cleanliness and our moral judgments. And when I say our understanding, I mean something that is unconscious. 72. Okay, the bibliography would cover this stuff. Yeah, we could peruse that bibliography once we're done here. It might just be references. I don't know if there's like a broader bibliography maybe at the bottom of the entire book, but further, this has been replicated and found that the effect is more pronounced among patients with obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay. The moral appropriation of physical cleanliness can be seen dramatically throughout political and religious history. The untouchables in the Indian caste system and the Japanese Burakumin are clear examples of this tendency, and the book of Leviticus in the Old Testament, which is a guide to morality, is organized around differentiating the clean from the unclean. Purity of tradition is also central to nationalist discourse and has been used repeatedly to combat foreign influence or deflect anxiety onto convenient out-group scapegoats, which may be the basis of much anti-Semitism and other racial, cultural, or minority derogation. All right, color. Stain is another potent metaphor connected in its physical manifestation to the experience of cleanliness at base, but also resulting in a complex visual metaphor system on its own. As any experience with mixing things of colors will make clear, light colors are more easily besmirched than dark colors and are thus more vulnerable to corruption or irreversible change. The structural concepts of pollution in food, safety, and other physical domains also map to this visual metaphor of whiteness as purity and blackness as dirt. If this visual color metaphor has moral relevance, it would be expected that various moral processing tasks would be affected by color, such as the degree to which things are judged to be good and bad. The most basic form of this effect could be the speed of valence categorization, a type of moral Stroop effect where incongruent visual presentation, for example, or in other words, combining white color and bad things, slows recognition time. So I don't know if you all are familiar with the Stroop effect, but in the classic Stroop effect, given the word red written in blue ink, it takes longer to state the actual color blue than if the word matches the color, such as the word red written in red ink. A similar effect was found based on the interaction between color and moral implication of words. In one experiment, they found that hand copying a story about an immoral action sped up reaction times for both words written in black and immoral words. Using a similar design, the same experimenters found that cleaning products were also more desirable to those showing such a moral Stroop effect, which is another suggestion that the physical and moral domains overlap. Okay. I use those terms interchangeably. Sorry. Oh, I see. Okay. It seems like the general sample size for most of these are about 30 to 7 students before division into specific conditions. I'm not filled with much confidence by that, to be honest. Yeah, that's not a ton. Are most of the writers psychologists? I think it's a mix, psychologists and neuroscientists. Just yeah, I think it's more so scientists than like straight up philosophers. It's, you know, we could check once we're through. While perception of color is related to pollution and dirt has effects based on the experience of purity, the experience of darkness and light can have independent moral impact. This is based on research showing that people seem to feel more anonymous and uninhibited when they experience dim lighting, which enables them to engage in more unethical behaviors. In one recent experiment, participants were assigned to rooms with either bright lighting or dim lighting and were asked to engage in some decision-making tasks where they could cheat. Even though it was made clear to them that all decisions were anonymous, those in the dim room tended to cheat more than those in the well-lit room. Another experiment had participants wearing sunglasses to create the experience of darkness, or regular glasses, and found that those wearing sunglasses were more likely to cheat than those wearing regular glasses. One might object that darkness does in fact increase anonymity. It is important to note, however, that in neither study did the lighting have anything to do with anonymity. Instead, these results seem to suggest that cues of reduced lighting create an illusionary sense of anonymity, which licensed unethical behavior. The observation that moral decision-making process take cues from sensory perceptions of color and lighting provide further support to the somatic markers hypothesized by Damasio. If moral decisions were being made independently of physical and perceptual biases, the rational mind should easily be able to factor in the function of sunglasses, but empirically it does not seem to do so. All right, we got taste. Studies are weird. People are weirder. But that is a mad guess I'm making based on the writing. Always skeptical of psychologists after the grand study replication incident. Yep, we know all too well. I'm seeing these 2012s and I'm thinking that's too early, you know? The experience of taste has been found to inform moral judgment in ways other than disgust. One might expect the opposite of disgust to also have an effect, though in the other direction. As one test of this, researchers investigated the effect of sweetness. Specifically, in one experiment, those described as liking sweet foods were judged to be more agreeable, and in another experiment, the preference for sweet foods was indeed associated with agreeableness. People who desired sweet foods were also more likely to exhibit altruism in the form of intention to volunteer for cleanup efforts. Related to taste, fishy smells have also been found to increase the sense of suspicion, even to abstract things unrelated to physical or gustatory concerns, such as economic trust decisions. So this is what I was referring to. You make someone smell something really, bad or fishy, and that'll affect their what we would otherwise think are rational decisions. These results strengthen the case that bodily influence feeds into morality by showing associations with prosociality in addition to rejection and aversion. Much of the Western philosophical foundations of moral codes rest upon the concept of reciprocity and justice. Both have to do with the idea of balance, whether it is in the tit-for-tat sense or the idea of fairness and equal rights before the law. Even as early as the classical Greeks and Romans, justice was personified as a goddess bearing a scale. The dominant modern discourses about fairness also heavily make use of physical metaphors, such as the level playing field or the redistribution of benefits. The moral relevance of physical balance may manifest in two forms. First, metaphors of balance of accounts are often used in moral conceptualizations. Well-being is seen as a form of wealth. Sometimes you have more or less of, and thus something that can be compared in quantity with others. Justice in this formulation is the pursuit of fairness with regard to the quantitative well-being. This also holds with regard to the handling of debts. That is, one can have a moral debt to someone that must be paid off, either in positive or negative senses, which is how retribution, revenge, and reciprocation play into this metaphorical scheme. All right, second, the experience of physical balance may tip moral judgment. The physical experience of balance seems to make abstract conceptual metaphors such as parity and fairness implicitly more accessible. This bodily priming has been found to modify the judgment of political categories, which are often also labeled in a metaphorical, though arbitrary way, such as the description of political philosophies as left or right. A study that shifted participants' physical balance slightly to the left or right demonstrated a tendency to judge an unrelated political position. Note the metaphorical language that must be used even to discuss the concept. That wasn't necessary. Study that shifted participants' physical balance slightly to the left or right demonstrated a tendency to judge an unrelated political position either as more left-wing or right-wing, congruent with the experimental manipulation. Thus, what one might expect to be a purely rational determination is shaped by the physical experience of the subject. The sense of balance has also been, so that doesn't touch on the morality there at all. It seems like that just touches on, that's more like the base level, what you see to be true is affected by your bodily experience. The sense of balance has also been found to affect judgment, leading to an increase in the value placed on compromised choices. The mechanism behind this observed effect was hypothesized to be a metaphorical link between the concrete physical sensation of balance and the abstract concept of parity, which is connected to moral ideas of fairness. As categorization of political ideas tends to have moral weight, based on whether or not the person making the judgment has sympathy for those positions, the fact that physical balance can affect the judgment, that judgment seems to offer at least further tangential evidence for the impact of the body on shaping moral judgment. Okay. Whew. I'm going to be honest, this sounds like some Lord of the Rings stuff at this point. It does. It sounds out there, right? Hopefully, people are continuing to try these things. Perhaps we should have a separate Gemini. Actually, that's what I wanted to do, right? I set this up. How much does morality depend on our body emotions? How rational is it? And so this would search for philosophical theories contrasting moral rationalism with moral sentimentalism, focusing on, so I guess this is more close to home than emotivism. Sentimentalism, I'd imagine, doesn't have anything about emoting. Focusing on arguments regarding whether moral judgments stem from reason or emotional somatic responses. Investigate the concepts of embodied ethics and embodied cognition to understand how physical states, sensations such as disgust or cleanliness, and the body's condition influence moral decision-making. Research psychological models of morality, specifically the social intuitionist model and the dual process theory to evaluate the roles of automatic intuition versus controlled reasoning. Look for neuroscientific evidence concerning moral judgment, identifying brain regions associated with emotional processing versus cognitive control. So that we're seeing the VM prefrontal cortex again. Explore the concept of moral dumbfounding and the somatic marker hypothesis to analyze situations where reasoning fails to explain moral convictions rooted in bodily feelings. Examine evolutionary perspectives on the origins of morality to determine the extent to which it evolved from social emotions and instincts versus abstract calculation, and then synthesize the findings to define the balance and interaction between bodily emotional inputs and rational deliberation in the formation of moral systems. So I'm going to let that one run. Yo, Energy Daunter, what's good? I recently read an article which discusses and compares the ideas of A.J. Ayer and Edmund Husserl regarding how we infer whether other minds are conscious in philosophy. Would you be interested in reading it? Would I be reading interested? Probably not, because like we just covered like a more scientifically grounded discussion of when kids learn how to when kids learn some sense of understanding other people's emotions and intentions, and that to me would be much more effective than something speculative from philosophers. Unless, I mean, I guess these guys must have been around the same time, and it was a while ago, right? Do I know Husserl right? Husserl's like a long time ago type of person. Yeah, 1938. So I like at this point, if regardless of whether they're right in their conclusion, I'm less interested in something as speculative as a philosophical work from almost 100 years ago. The problem of other minds is a mess, right? I prefer thinking I'm not the only one. Philosophy of mind and consciousness is hard, right? Yeah. Well, that's why we're trying to make it easy here. We're trying to make this stuff accessible. Okay, at the very least, can you ask ChatGPT to summarize it? I could do that. Is it all here? Is it all this one article? Like just this one from here to here, because that's easy enough. Anoint the beat, yo. That's an elite line. I teach philosophy of mind and legit have no clue what's going on sometimes. I'm a big fan of Brandom in the theory of mind topic. Yo, Changebox, what's good? How do I have 7 viewers? I didn't know I had 7 viewers, but that's exciting. I keep my viewers, I keep the viewers number hidden here. But yeah, hopefully, you know, we get more people in here, because I think it's more fun when people are chit-chatting and coming up with ideas for things to talk about, such as Energy Domter right here. Oh gosh, Stan Gang is loyal to the cause. Oh no, lead us to the golden path. Jeez. So I guess just to give another context to this channel, what we're doing is leading everyone to the path where they figure out what the golden path is. So we don't have a golden path that works for everyone in a concrete way, but we're gonna be able to give people the conceptual tools that allows them to deal with their own life and their own path, their own ideas of what is true and what is moral and whatnot, and what is right for them to do. The title probably dragged in a few Alex O'Connor viewers too. Hell yeah. It's 2:30 a.m. for me. I'm here because I'm a degen. It's all about the ideas. It makes it worth it. You know where the golden path leads to, right? Are we talking about Wicked right now? Are we talking about the wizard? So I need to not sleep anymore to find the golden path. Noted. Well, unfortunately, we are going to talk about sleep in even in part 2, and how it affects our thinking. So I don't think that the path we provide is going to lead you to not sleeping. That being said, we don't prescribe. We just point out what does what, and then you can figure out if that's something you should or should not do. So, enlightens the masses, the people of the world love okay, and the zeal of the enlightened party, the vanguard of the masses. Where are you getting all this language from? I'm on holiday now. Hey, congratulations. I get to be a shitter for a bit. Hell yeah. Live the life. Enjoy the vacation. All right, here's a summary of the text, which explores the intersection of analytic and continental philosophy through the lens of the problem of other minds. So I think like we are totally towards continental versus analytic in like a philosophy of philosophy sense, but that's not to say that we can't gain from analytic philosophies and continental. All right, the context. The author, traditionally a continental philosopher favoring Hegel, Heidegger, and Kant, reflects on reading Ayer, a stark analytic positivist. Despite viewing analytic philosophy as a weak tradition, the author finds Ayer's approach to epistemology surprisingly potent and compatible with continental phenomenology. All right, on other minds, the core comparison lies in how we know what that other conscious beings exist. Husserl's view: we cannot experience another's mind directly. If we did, we would be them. Therefore, we understand others via analogy and transference, assuming they are like us. Right, but once again, or not once again, but this assuming they are like us is not just a rational thing we're doing. Like I don't think that's just me thinking, like the scope of what's happening here is not just me thinking that they're like us. It's something that I'm predisposed to think at like an unconscious level as well, given our DNA and my entire life of learning and change and neuroplasticity all leads me to a very internalized belief that other people are like me and that I have some sense of what other people are thinking based on their behavior. But once again, that wouldn't, not once again, but that would be closer to Husserl's view that we wouldn't be able to grasp we can't even grasp our own minds in some coherent sense or some intelligible sense. Like we certainly couldn't grasp another's mind. All right, Ayer's view rejects the idea that other minds are unobservable entities hidden behind behavior. According to Ayer's verificationalism, if a mind were truly unobservable, claiming it exists would be a meaningless metaphysical hypothesis. Right, it would be, right? Isn't the downstream of this is that it's meaningless to even recognize yourself as like a meaningful metaphysical hypothesis? That's the whole point of a lot of these Eastern traditions and what we're going to talk about in the document. We're pretty much going to point out, be careful with the types of things that you assume yourself to be, because that will affect whether or not you feel like you can do that in the future and whatnot. Like, don't be too constraining with your own self-understanding. Granted, we do need some sort of self-understanding. Not only we don't have a choice, but we can leverage it pragmatically to affect our lives. Like my understanding that I know that I can do certain things, that I can sit down here and I could do this stream. Like that's an important part of my self-understanding, that even though it's, inappropriate in some Eastern sense, it's still helping me out as far as I'm concerned when I think about it right now. Okay. What is going on here? Oh, we're backed up. Marx and Lenin. Sleep is the time during which we recognize our experience in the world. We draw new relational perspectives, which is why our dreams can feel continuous and disjointed at the same time. The conscious is looking for linkages between old concepts and new concepts. Yeah, I mean, that seems to be what the science tells us about what our brain's doing during sleep. It's a lot to do with learning and new associations and building what we've done during the day. What AI message is this, Onion? Yeah, I don't even know if it's AI or if he's just coming up with it. Reclusive, okay. Applied to stand ideology. Oh, I see. Pog. When we see similarity, we assume similarity. That's what's going on. When we see similarity, yeah, but there's a lot behind when we see similarity, we assume similarity. There's a lot of complexity to that. But I think it captures some essence, of course. But metaphysically speaking, that's irrelevant. Okay, how is that irrelevant? We extend similarity. So the idea is that our understanding of what is similar is still contingent upon our cultural understanding. What we had for breakfast this morning, our learning throughout our entire life, our dispositions, our personality, like all of this stuff affects what we believe to be similar in this moment. So it feels similar. And so, when we see similar, we assume similar is actually the same thing just said twice as far as predictive processing is concerned. I think our most contemporary neuroscience points out that both of those are the same action here. We are seeing the prediction, and the prediction, like this gets into this idea of priors. So we can think about priors as what we're predisposed to experience right now. That will be the assumption. The assumption is similarity, but that assumption isn't it's not something that we rationally come up with right now. It's something that's been conditioned. So when I see someone and I see them say something and I assume that they mean it what they just said because I know that they're an honest person, like that's something that's afforded by a long history of learning and everything that affects my thoughts right now. It's not just my rational thinking right in this moment. Now I can post hoc try to rationalize why I think what they're thinking, and what I'm going to have to do then is presuppose a lot of concepts that I'm going to communicate. And those are also internalized. How is that irrelevant? We extend similarity past that which we have evidence for, because assuming similarity does not add to the actual existence of other minds. Husserl, the type of guy to make a philosophical statement and then go about his day. What a guy. Is that not what we're doing here? Sure it does. If we had to negotiate everything, it would be impossible to accomplish anything. It depends what we mean by negotiate. Like we can consider that what we're doing in even this scenario right now is we're negotiating in some sense. We're negotiating about meaning, you could think. But we don't have to negotiate about all meaning. So it's not like we have a problem. I'm not like constantly banning people in the chat because they're going crazy. Like there's some sense of an understanding of how we behave, and the fact that people are here at least shows that I'm not an insane person that is just gonna come on here and blast music through my iPhone on the microphone. I don't know why I went up here, but like you probably wouldn't watch if that was my contribution to the negotiation. If I was just blasting Lady Gaga on my old phone. Okay, I assume that when I see a person, they have feelings like me, but I have no reason to believe that. Outside of them appearing to be like me, if I recognize the words they speak, I assume that they are even more like me. Yeah. I mean, that's a way to conceptualize what's going on there. I again agree, but this is not metaphysically relevant, or am I missing something? Yeah, so like we're trying to make a case that's very deep down, like the fundamental case, which I'm trying to do via predictive processing and the theory of mind around that type of discussion. So I think what science points out to us and logic is that we are conditioned to believe that we are like each other, because that is how successful societies That is what led to successful societies, like in like a evolutionary sense. The cultures and the biology that's going on along with that. We discussed this a lot. Um, the culture and the biology kind of evolved together. That goes into the Baldwin effect. And so, when we see a society today where we all kind of understand these things about each other, like that is a huge aspect of nature and nurture. But like you could point out the significant aspect of nature that's involved when you point out the baby. I forget if it was like a 15-month-old. Maybe it was from the discussion a little like a few days ago. The 15-month-old was able to show some signs of identifying or showed signs of at least identifying the intentions of adults in the room. So it did seem like, this is so ingrained in nature that young children can understand other people's intentions at like a visceral level. But once again, when we say like understand their intentions, what we mean is like react to them in some meaningful way, not that they actually like grasp the intention in some holistic way. Okay, this is both epistemologically questionable and metaphysically dubious. Okay, I know you're not arguing with me, and I'm not arguing with you. We are arguing with ideas, and neither of ours are fully formed. I love the conversation. Hell yeah. Some good positive. I don't know if I know too much about Jordan Peterson stuff, despite everything, but it's not about the game. It's about the game of games. It's the meta game, to be able to be wholesome and non-toxic in discussion. To my understanding, Husserl's view is that we infer other people are conscious, but we can't access their internal mental states. Whereas, to my understanding, Ayer's view is that we both infer other people are conscious and can access their internal mental states through observing their behavior. So yeah, this could come down to some type of semantic issue where we have to now define what it means to access someone else's internal states. And if it just means pragmatically responding to them responding to them in a certain way, such that it looks like that, I am doing something specific because of what signal you're releasing, then yeah, Ayer's right here. But if we mean in some like way where we like grasp their internal states, then we can't say that's the case. Once again, we can't even grasp our own intentions in the moment. We can try to figure out our own intentions, and a lot of times when we think we have a grasp of our own intentions, we fall into a bad habit, then also, even on our best intention, mindfulness shows that even our intention of staying focused on our breath does not lead us to stay focused on our breath. We lose, like anyone that starts out in mindfulness realizes how difficult it is to will their way into just focusing on the breath. Is that alignment happens somewhat automatically? Right, it is a very much pragmatic alignment that happens unconsciously. I like to think that I have some thoughtful ideas, but what the hell do you probably do have thoughtful ideas, but having thoughtful ideas doesn't mean that they are the final ideas, right? We could always keep growing. Okay. It's different than a question. Okay. I'm confused on the metaphysics. Okay. There's a huge difference to Descartes phenomenology. Sorry, I'm coming off as a stick. I don't mean to be. These are great questions and ideas. But clearly there's something more. Oh man, this is the farthest back I've ever been. This is exciting, but also at some point I'm gonna have to figure out how to deal with being behind on chat, and it's going to my idea is that I will have a chat bot that copies the copies the chat at regular intervals and like gives me something that I can throw into Gemini, and we have a prompt that like summarizes it. Now I could also just make a bot that uses the Gemini or ChatGPT OpenAI API and actually just give us every like 2 minutes or something an like a summary of what's happening in chat, like what's being discussed, and that's another thing that I'll work on if that comes up, if we can sustain the amount of people here. Okay. Dig into intention because we'll find that it's kind of bottomless. If you're paying for viewers, can I pay you for more? These ones are pretty good. I like them. I'm not paying for viewers, except on those YouTube videos. I did pay for some ads because I was pretty stoked about those videos and I wanted farther reach. But I paid the same amount for each video, so that shows that a huge effect of the popularity of the video is actually the ground game. So the fact that the one video was big on Alex O'Connor's subreddit was a big deal. Like that affected the viewership significantly. Anyway, it's almost 3 a.m. I need to do the sleep thing. Good luck with the sleep thing. Enjoy the sleep thing. Right, yeah, it would be hard to know what it would mean to apply something correctly or incorrectly. I think we would just need to get closer in the conversation to where we actually, where you both actually disagree. But that's how it works. AI summaries of chat is genius. Stand implement immediately. Well, I just don't think usually I could read chat as it happens, so we don't need the summary. But if the chat's going faster than I can understand, then yeah, AI summaries of chat seems to be like a no-brainer. I think that would be a lot of fun. That's a valid question. I'm drunk, and if I'm honest, I forgot what we were arguing about. Do not give me that power. I will mess so much with that AI chat thing unintentionally. All right, well, my prompt is going to be so genius that you will not be able to mess with it. That's probably not true, but if it's just summarizing, I don't know how you would mess with it. Maybe I could just say don't allow for any like injections, no command injections, no SQL injections here. That's why I created AI. It'll be funny. 100%. Arguments are my favorite kind. If I had known you were going to be here drunk, I would have joined you. Hell yeah. Skirt, I just forgot we were debating. All right. Oh my gosh, the pseudo problem of zombies. We're back on zombies. Okay, so according if minds were truly unobservable, claiming it exists would be meaningless. Okay, yeah. So this is going to come down to some type of semantic discussion, and we just have to figure out what we're trying to say by being precise and by giving and asking for reasons. Therefore, other people must be defined by their empirical manifestations, behavior, and sense content. It must be defined. Look at that. This is pointing to the semantic side of this discussion, not by hidden life accessible only to them. So yeah, it's an argument over whether we should we prioritize the phenomenology, or should we prioritize the the stimuli, but even that's incoherent. So both sides of this are somewhat incoherent in some sense, but maybe not incoherent, but unintelligible, I should say. Okay, the author praises Ayer for demonstrating that the problem of other minds is a pseudo problem. It is logically malformed to ask about something that essentially exceeds possible experience. If a being appears to be conscious to me, it is nonsensical to worry about whether they are actually conscious inside, because that inside is unverifiable. The outside is effectively unverifiable to some extent, given that each person has a subjective understanding of the world. And this is why we come up with aggregation mechanisms such as voting or just such as discussion that allow us to, you know, come to an agreement on something, or not an agreement, but just, you know, come to a consensus somehow. So, you know, what does it mean for us to understand a person? You know, there's so each of us will have many different subjective understandings about that person. So, you know, it's very difficult to come up to this idea of having like a clear, like a full grasp of them. That said, pragmatically, we could come up with similar things where, like, if we both, if all of us looked at someone who was wearing a red shirt, we would probably all say red shirt, unless, you know, one of us were colorblind. And even though I am colorblind, at least I would identify red. Okay. Philosophical zombies are fun. If you enjoy philosophical zombies, I would highly recommend the consciousness videos I made. The most recent one has less views, but is I'm more proud of, and goes farther in its ontological discussions, I should say. And I think based on what you said, you would enjoy it a lot, and I spent a lot of time on that one. So the first one kind of covers the evolutionary basis of consciousness, and the second one covers like the in the moment neuroscientific basis, or the neurological basis of cognition, of consciousness. I know you guys are like me because I can very reliably predict your behavior. Not perfectly, but very reliably, right? Bet if I hit one of you with a hammer, you punch me square in the face. All right, well, let's not condone violence here, but but yeah, that's probably the case. Standard anti-physicalist arguments. So yeah, also the other thing is, in that most recent take, I do make a physicalist argument. However, it's more physicalist than idealist, but it's also more idealist than physicalist in some sense. It's kind of like an idealism that is beholden to the heuristics of empirical science, if that makes sense. And those heuristics point towards a more physicalist view. Granted, it's not that like the ontology of everything we know is coming from the physical world. It's you know, it's manifesting in our conscious experience. But that said, when we're trying to make sense of, like, you know, what is affecting the behavior of our consciousness, we would go to the physical world, given what we know about the physical world, via our idealist manifestation of meaning. So it's crazy. I don't make it that complicated in the video. Some of the intricacies there I've discussed since that video. We need to make some type of follow-up, a retrospective. Okay. It's way too much. Where he needs a full day off a week. To be clear, I'm not a skeptic, but I think you're oversimplifying matters. I don't enjoy them at all. I'm tired of Chalmers. Right? Even Lucky Chalmers. What you're talking about, opposite forces that are not directly opposite, which creates a rotational vector. This will make no sense by the time you get to it. Idealism is where you'll never convince me. Monism is the way to go, but not the idealist side. Here, I'm stubborn. Yeah, I think that we have a, so it's I don't think I'm allowed to say that I'm idealistic idealist, nor can I say I'm physicalist in what I've been discussing tonight, right? It's that our, like, the meaning that we experience, right? The meaning that I feel like I know, and that is is disclosed to me, to use Heidegger's term, when I think about things and whatnot. That is, even under a physicalist view, appearing in my conscious experience. Now we can make sense of our conscious experience through the physical world, and that's what we do. But that very notion of the physical world affecting our conscious experience then necessitates an idea that there is no such thing as some external absolute truth, because each person's biological basis is different. So that would affect different experiences, conscious experiences. Now, yeah, so the question is how do we and why do we know that the physical world is true? And it comes down to our conviction of the meaning that appears to us. Like, my understanding of the physical world is learned, it's internalized, it was conditioned. And so, I could say, like, oh, if that's just what's happening, then why should I prioritize that over this idea that, hey, the only thing that I know to be true is consciousness, which is another fact that I say is completely culturally contingent. So we have these different concepts that are appearing to us in our minds. How do we prioritize one over the other? And really, the argument I make is that given my current conceptual understanding, the heuristic that I can follow that allows me to make sense of what is true in some practical way, like something that I can benefit from believing, and something that will benefit me as I experience and exist in the world, is specifically the heuristics of empirical science and logic. And that doesn't mean the physical world, right? Like, that means the methods that have led us to the notion of the physical world that we arrive at. But those methods also dictate that if we find out something else about quantum physics or whatnot, that needs to affect our notion or our understanding of the physical world. But it's really the methodology that is paramount. It's the idea of how you get to a truth that is reliable. And yeah, so that's kind of the story I try to keep saying. But it's a weird story to say because it's not actually physicalist, because we're not purporting the physical world to be the ontological or the source of ontology. We're recognizing that the source of ontology, as we intuit it, like what we experience as meaning, like outside of experience and consciousness, meaning is like unintelligible. So yeah, we have to recognize that meaning is coming from our thoughts, but we can't also think that just because the source of ontology is consciousness, that creates what we believe to be the physical world. Like, we can have a conceptual understanding about something, and that thing that we're having the conceptual understanding about isn't necessarily true in some absolute sense. But we all have some understanding of the physical world that is culturally contingent. We learned it in school and whatnot, and that leads us to have pragmatically similar understandings about the physical world. And our understandings might lead us to consider that empirical science is effective. So yeah, that it challenges what like being right means in like these types of ideas. And it really makes us consider what we're actually trying to do. Like, what are we looking for in our conceptualization of the world and ourself and our understanding and whatnot. And that's kind of the whole premise of part one. So, I don't know if I'm going to be able to catch up on this chat. This is exciting. I'm missing chat, but I'm also bummed out about that. I don't know what's a response to what I just said, or if you guys are just chit-chatting, so I'm going to try to skim here. Here's the metaphysics matter. Great question, but okay. So we would have to separate physical from mental, and I don't think we are. So really what I'm trying to point out is that in our views, like in our consciousness, in our experience, we're just dealing with these feelings. We're dealing of this feeling of conceptual, objective things, right? Like I'm just dealing with this conceptual understanding of a pen. I'm dealing with the meaning that allows me to think about the sun. And we can talk about meaning as both something that we can, something as explicit that we can reflect on explicitly, but also meaning needs to be discussed in this like unconscious, acted out way. Like, you could consider that part of my understanding about this pen is such that when I stop paying attention to it and I start writing something down, I must understand something about the pen that is unconscious in my activity of writing. This is where Heidegger kind of primes us. So yeah, we just have these concepts, but these concepts aren't the thing themselves. And the idea of the thing itself being separate from the concept is also unintelligible. That's what Brandom pointed out, leveraging Hegel's phenomenology of spirit. You know, the idea that there's this gap between the thing in itself as some external objective thing in the world and our subjective perception is unintelligible. And I mean, they get there like in some or Brandom gets there in some rational, logical way. But I try to point out that objectivity is felt, so we can always ground this stuff in the biological processes that are happening when we think about things. So that's why I always say, like, when I see this as a pen, my understanding that this pen is a pen, it's right here, it's objectively here, this is objectively a pen, like, that is afforded to me, that feeling in the moment is afforded to me by all the processes going in my brain, and a significant aspect of those processes are affective. So it makes me feel like those are true in some objective sense, but really what's happening is just I'm feeling that it's true. And there's a lot of things that I feel to be true that end up not being true. And that points out to me that just because something feels to be true isn't the heuristic that has like ultimate authority. So how do we navigate the world when we know that things can turn out to be not the way that we think they are? And we know a lot about the experience of learning that something isn't the way that you thought it was. So I suggest maybe we should pay attention to that type of experience. When our brain tells us that maybe what we think is not right, then maybe we should expect and pay attention to that and consider if that's something that is you know, something to consider. Okay, I'm guessing that you're saying that I'm actually very idealist, and it does sound very idealist, but I don't think I'm allowed to say I'm idealist. Like, I don't, so really what I say that I am is some sort of pragmatist, because when you think about concepts in these ways, what it really boils down to is linguistic practices. So like what we're trying to communicate. And when I communicate something, everyone's going to infer something differently because they each have their own biology that's processing their own conscious experience and whatnot. So everyone's going to have their own subjective understanding of what I'm conveying. So I have to be precise to try to make it so that what they get is pragmatically similar to what I'm trying to say. And we can consider what that means. Like, what, you know, we have pragmatically similar enough understandings of this thing as a pen such that when I say it's a pen, it doesn't affect any prediction error for you. Like, it doesn't affect any negative emotion for you. Now, if I were to say, like, hey, like, this is a penguin, and imagine everyone in chat was like, yeah, that's a penguin. Like, you might think you're going crazy. Like, your brain is gonna make that stand out. It's gonna maybe give you some cognitive dissonance. It's gonna make you feel weird. But you know, our brain doesn't do that when what happens is what we expected. So okay, I'm missing a lot of this stuff. I'm sorry, I'm not able to respond. I can't give gift subscription. Yeah, so the reason why I didn't want to, so I can become an affiliate now, but the problem with becoming an affiliate is then you guys now get ads, which I don't think would be the best right now. I think it would be nicer for new people to come in here and not be bombarded with ads than it is for me to get money yet. At some point I want to monetize this so that I can hopefully transition to working on this stuff full time, because I think this stuff is very important. And I also want to, you know, use any of the overflow of that, and also I'll probably just do some percentage of it. I want to, you know, make this I want to make a charity stream as like a very common thing on this channel, maybe like once a month or so, where I just give some percentage of what we get. But we'll see when we can make that jump into monetization. But I don't think it's yet. You know, I still have a job that is pretty good. So until I either lose that job or I can confidently get rid of that job and just work on this full time without feeling insecure, then I think we're chilling with no ads. I like no ads. No subs button, so we don't get ads every 30 minutes, right? Okay. Thank you, Onion Helmet. If I could, I would be no ads. I could just set up some other thing though. We could do like a Patreon or whatnot if that would expedite the transition. That's a problem once the original achieved mass mobilization. But the pen exists independently of you. So my understanding of this pen is that it exists independently of me. Like it's like non-psychological in that sense. In that my understanding of it is such that a property of it is that it would exist independently of me. But once again, like this idea that it exists independently of us is only being accessed by either my or your thinking about it. Without the thinking about it, there's the concept is gone. Like there's no concept. The concept is thought of. Like that's really the point here. But that doesn't mean that the pen doesn't exist independently. Like just the idea of like the pen existing independently of us is only something that it can be felt and communicated. It's not something that means anything outside of our experiences of it. It wouldn't be appropriate to say that it has some objective transcendent status. Now I'm just talking about like philosophically bedrock, like metaphysics bedrock. I'm not trying to make a case about how we should speak about things in certain fields. Granted, if I'm in the science, I say this all the time, if I'm in the science department, I'm not going to act like our understanding of the pen is contingent on our experience. I'm going to say that this is a pen, and that's true, right? But really, when we get down to the very bedrock of experience, truth is something that's felt in the moment differently by each person. And not only that, it's dynamic. It's changing every second. We just looked at a neuroplasticity. There are changes in your brain happening at every second. And we also discussed that memory and also just pattern recognition is reconstructive. It's your brain trying to reactivate the parts of the brain that occurred during the initial activation. So as imagine that your brain's trying to reactivate those connections, and those connections are changing. Thus, the experience that you have as a product of those activations would be slightly different over time. But certain aspects of that experience are so internalized that when I look at this pen, even though parts of my brain are changing right now as it relates to this pen, it still feels like a pen over time. So Reclusive, if you're really interested in this stuff, part one is pretty sweet. We talk about all this stuff in a way that I think makes sense. And it really, really is grounded in the science. Like I'm not trying to do anything without the science. The science is keeping us grounded. I'm getting to this position out of what the science is telling us. At least that's what I believe. Okay. We could burn that bridge when we get there. I'm not convinced that the pen exists separate from the observer. The pen would not exist if the observer didn't, and the observer wouldn't exist. Okay, so yeah, I would give a similar response to that. All right, I'm probably so late on this. I'm sorry. Right, it's idealist by nature, but like I think like if we were to actually check, like if I were to ask, what do idealists believe? Like I don't think I check all the boxes, because idealists believe that there's like some sort of, or you know what I would say, it's that the definition of idealism is too ambiguous. So like that, this is the pragmatist side of me. Like we have to be mindful about the definitions, how precise they are. And I think there's ambiguities in this definition that that I can't ascribe to. Like I'm not allowed to. I try to think about these things as a normative pragmatism. Okay, while materialists believe the universe is made of physical matter, idealists believe reality is fundamentally mental, or spiritual or immaterial. So the idea that like reality is a thing, though, that's being created by the mental is where we're getting ambiguities, because you could get to like the people like the analytic idealists who like literally believe that like aspects of the world are being created by the mental, and that's something I don't abide with. We're just like, when I say a concept of a pen, what I'm referring to are specifically the activations in your brain when you're thinking about the pen, and the activations in your brain when you're using the pen as a tool and you're not thinking explicitly about the pen. Right? So like the idea that there is something external to us in the universe is only something felt in the individual via the mental processes. And that's what allows to ground us and have this type of idea. But yeah, so we're not going to make a case about what's primary or secondary, unless we're talking about like ontology. That's why I say like, when I say that consciousness is the source of ontology, I'm specifically referring to this notion of meaning, right? Like, this is only something that we can intuit in our conscious experience. There's without humans in the world, imagine humans never came to be, like, there is no like meaning felt. And so I guess there's the presupposition that meaning is something that can be felt. But if you were to say that there is meaning there, I would just remind you that it requires you to think right now for there to be meaning, to be meaning there, in the sense that, like, I would say, like, yeah, the matter would all be there, the energy would all be there, in theory, like materially, like that's our understanding of the physical universe, like the physical parts of it would be there, but like any of these patterns, like the idea that energy is separate from the material, and or maybe that's not even appropriate, but the fact that there are planets, and that, like the fact that we're going to categorize anything is something that we're just doing now. And yeah, all right. Many idealists argue that what we call the physical world is actually a collection of ideas. So yeah, just because we have a concept of the physical world, this is the tricky part. It's like, paradoxically, our concept of the physical world is such that it isn't originated by our ideas. It's just that the concept is. That's why we have to disconnect concepts from what the concepts are about. But once again, when we're doing that, we're not trying to actually make a gap where there's like something that is true and then something that's just experience. It's just all there is the experience of things being true, and that's a felt experience. All right. But that is a penguin. If we all agree that's a penguin. Man, I'm way late. Okay, I gotta just stop talking. Okay, fascination is birth. Your description is essentially idealist by nature. If you think the nature of a pen hinges on the mind perceiving the pen, that's ideal. Yeah, so it depends what we mean by the nature of the pen, right? So like my understanding of the physical world is such that its physical makeup would not change based on whether I'm thinking about it or not, but its conceptual nature would. It's like the meaning of it, and when I say meaning, I'm specifically referring to a very phenomenological sense of meaning. That's actually super sweet. Okay, so just make a Patreon or somewhere I could buy you a coffee or do something. I do appreciate you saying this. Create a space that is super cool and productive and attracts good people, and you're a good man. Thank you. Let me give you $5 already. Let's just keep at it, and yeah, eventually I will. I guess if I don't know, I'll think about it. I'll think about when we would want to go about this. I would want to do it in the way that's like best for everyone. I don't want to make anyone feel like we're just doing this for money and whatnot, which is not the goal here. The goal is literally what the document says the goal is. I am the financial manager. How can I help? I was looking for a loan. I'll probably only pitch up once a month because I can't be here this time. No worries, no worries. Yeah, feel free to check in whenever. I'll be still doing this thing. I feel like I have to do it, so I will do it. As long as I can. Well, I hope to see you here again either way. Hell yeah. The idea of separation is what creates the separation. The thought is the act. I hear you now. Not sure why Google has decided that act should be capitalized to put it. Does that pretty frequently. Did you see I sent you a book on Buddhism and neuroplasticity? Yo, Darmadan, what's good? You sent, was this in a chat somewhere? Or was this on Discord? Because I have to check the Discord. It's been a while. I mean, epistemologically speaking, what you say is completely true, but metaphysically speaking, what you're saying is very idealist. But I might be missing the points here, as mentioned. I'm very drunk. Yeah, I think once again, it's just down to like the wording of idealism. I just don't feel comfortable identifying with idealism because of the implications that people will infer from that. And so while I'm trying to be more careful about what I'm trying to say, I prescribe more safely with normative pragmatism of some sort, where I'm trying to be mindful of the words, because I'm just trying to communicate something. Like, that's really all that's going on here. The idea that there is some like metaphysical right answer is also, I would say, similarly misguided. So, I'm just trying to communicate something that allows us to make sense of the world and our position in it. Am I saying that the changes are also true? You're saying that truth is relative, but the relativity is also relative. I'm just trying to point out that when we talk about truth, like, I see that most salient as a felt quality of the moment you're in, and that moment changes, So even though the moment, it might feel like you're in the same moment from moment to moment, there's differences about those moments that are affecting your experience of the world and also what you think. And that's where like these embodied discussions come into play. Like, we often think about rational as operating in this space that's external to ourselves and our bodies. But really what's happening is processes in our mind, where certain linguistic parts of our minds are going in a certain, are doing a certain thing in relation with the emotional parts, and all the stuff that we talk about in the consciousness video is happening at every second. So, but I'm envious. I wish I could engage with you in a more intellectual fashion. Maybe another time. Hell yeah. No, I'll be always down to talk about this stuff. Stop apologizing, or I'm going to demand an apology for all the apologizing. That's the one apology I won't give. Discord. Hell yeah. I didn't even know we had that command. The Discord is the Rich Sonite Agora for all those who wish to talk outside of the stream. That's what it's hopefully going to be. That's another thing. If you want to talk about these things in the Discord, that's totally good. I'll put a lot of effort in my response. All right. I feel like I owe Dharmadam. I feel like I owe you a response here, but I don't know if you responded to my response actually. Now I get what you're saying. I fully understand you. Oh, good. Nice. Awesome. Probably sitting there right now. The pen is an abstracted differentiation of the whole that the mind creates. I think we're adding in some more ambiguity there than I would like, but maybe. It's certainly, we can consider our concepts as abstract. We talk about the idea of universals and particulars in the notion, or in the conversation of concepts. Everyone patiently waiting. Oh man, take any donations and give it to a charity of your choice. Hell yes. What do we have here? Is this another thumbnail? Oh, here we go. Oh my gosh. Very nice. If someone doesn't value evidence, what is this an actual quote? I know this isn't an actual picture, but is this an actual quote? If someone doesn't value evidence, what evidence are you going to provide that proves that they should value evidence? If someone doesn't value logic, what logical argument would you invoke to prove they should value logic? These are good questions. It's pointing out that if you don't agree on the heuristic of what leads to the right answer, then, you know, we're at like a fundamental impasse. That's the real danger of like giving up on science and the empirical method and logic itself. Okay, don't get it twisted. I don't know about patient, but yeah, the universe is a single unit. Both the observer and the pen exist when in it. From the perspective of the universe, there's no differentiation between the two. The mind abstracts the two to be separate. So this is kind of, you know, this is somewhat of like a somewhat dualistic. So yeah, I guess what I've been saying is different from that view, but I can certainly intuit what you're saying. It surely sounds like Sam Harris quote. It does. I think Reclusi might have started sleeping. I do have that effect on people. Okay, I think I have to get out of here. I have to actually drive right now, unfortunately. Usually I just go to bed after this, but I gotta actually do something. All right, so if I were to guess what's going on in here, I think interoception. So this is like our body getting a sense of our internal state. So like imagine internal stimuli. We've discussed a lot of external stimuli, such as balance and disgust in response to things externally. But this is going to point out that interoception or interoception affects our moral reasoning in the moment. It seems like moral decisions making in practice requires actual physical feedback as would be experienced at the time of action, not just an abstract formulation of the stakes and options. That is, if the perspective of embodied morality advanced in this chapter were true, it would be likely that people would potentially predict different actions than they might actually take. Experimentally, people have indeed been found to predict that they would take less moral action than they actually do, because moral forecasting does not sufficiently engage the emotions due to lack of somatic feedback. Yeah, a lot of the stuff in this section is really cool. It's talking about how if the lab induces a fake heartbeat, some fake internal stimuli, that can affect how you think about what's happening around you. So like a fake heightened heart rate will actually affect how you react to things. And this is all part of that homeostasis idea, that our body is our body and brain are in deep connection, and they're reacting to the signals from each other. And thus, like things like heartbeat and hormones are really effective, are really significant in affecting the behavior of the other. All right, discussion and conclusion. It might be asked whether these effects are merely biases, errors of judgment that should be overcome given sufficient cognitive effort. However, the neuroscience findings point in another direction. Though some of these bodily influences on morality do indeed result in biases, the elimination of emotional or bodily influence would likely not have the desired effect, due to the importance of somatic markers for identifying moral action. The patients that Damasio investigated in his fMRI studies were not deficient in any way regarding rational processing power, but lacking appropriate bodily feedback. But lacking appropriate bodily feedback, were unable to accurately weigh moral consequences in their decision making. If we lose the emotional parts of our brain, we will start to make morally incoherent decisions. Now, just to point out, not morally incoherent to the person who's lost the emotional parts, right? They still have rational processing power, so they can easily still leverage that to come up with something they believe to be rational. It's just that everyone else who's operating very much in an emotional way with regard to what they believe to be moral is going to identify that as antisocial behavior. So that's the point here, or that's a big point here. Okay, I gotta get out of here. There we go. The Hongshu Me. During some of the holiday streams. An absolute fantastic chat this evening. It was really great to see some other thoughtful people besides just the Onion. I really hope to see more of you again soon. Hell yeah, Mad Cozy. Well, I'm glad that y'all are identifying this as cozy. I don't. I'm not a big live stream watcher, and I haven't really watched live streams. It's not like I've watched any one live stream like religiously, ever. So I don't know what the criteria is. I don't know what the basis is. So I'm just trying to make a good positive vibe here. So I'm glad people are having fun. Thank you all for chilling. Thanks for pushing back. Thanks for keeping the discussion going, and I'll be in the hot tub, and have a good rest. Yeah, thank you all. We know you're here for selfish reasons. It's okay. We love you anyway. Well, I mean, at the base level, it is selfish. It's just hopefully it's selfish for the good of others. that's the goal. It's selfish in the sense that my emotional well-being is now connected to my bringing about this document and actually having it do the change that I want it to do. So that's where we're at. But have a good rest of